All right, so we talked about the problems with what can happen when we start introducing off-the-string techniques. Now let's talk about how to troubleshoot those problems and make things start working correctly. So if your orchestra is playing, let's say, spiccato and they're not together, the first question you need to ask is, are they starting on the string? So then just make an observation. When they get to the spiccato passage, is everybody preparing that note, the very first note, and starting on the string before they bounce the rest? If the answer is no, that's probably why they're not together. And this is an easy fix because getting them to just start the bow on the string and stage it off is very simple to do. And in some of the demonstration videos that we're going to be doing later on, I'm going to show you how to do that with your orchestra. We also need to ask, is everybody playing in the same part of the bow? Because the bow is going to respond differently, a little differently in different places of the bow. And if they're severely off from one another, they're going to get a different kind of sound and maybe a faster or slower natural bounce. It can be corrected with the arm, but for a lot of them, you know, we're going to have people at different rates of tempo because of where they are on the bow. Also, we might have students that are just way too stiff and they're not able to use the wrist and the fingertips to be able to help absorb some of that impact. So maybe they don't want quite as much bounce, or maybe they're in the upper half of the bow or something like that, and they have to use a little bit more finesse. So getting them to relax a lot of times will solve a lot of your off-the-string issues. I think this is especially true for sautille bowings. If there's any tension at all, sautille will likely not happen. And it's unfortunate because it's one of those bowings where it's very difficult to get until you get it, and then you can always sautille from then. You know, once you start feeling that bow skip, you can recreate that, but getting them to do it for the very first time is a little tricky. But again, don't let them get frustrated to the point where they tense it up and try to force it to happen. Just be as loosey-goosey as you can, and things will start happening naturally. And you know, the more that we kind of just let everything happen naturally, let it bounce naturally, and not try to control everything with whatever, usually we get a nice natural sound. Now there's some times where the music's going to call for like hammer strokes at the frog or something, where we want something that doesn't sound, you know, quite as, you know, bouncy and, you know, effervescent as a nice spiccato section or ricochet or something like that. But for the initial stages of teaching it, I think it's good to just make it as natural as possible and then develop from there. Now we also have to understand that these off-the-string techniques are tempo dependent. You know, if you have brush strokes, you can do them very, very slowly and get them up to a certain speed before they become impractical. And then you're going to have a range of tempi that work well with spiccato, and then a range that works well with sautille. And so unfortunately, when you're playing a piece of music and it's the incorrect tempo, it's going to have the incorrect style, because maybe you're not playing the piece fast enough to be able to sautille, and it just sounds bad. And so the solution then is just to not program that piece of music. If your orchestra can't play it up to tempo, you might want to select different music. You know, otherwise, for a lot of competitions, you're going to lose points in those style categories and tempo categories, and those can add up. So the other thing that we need to teach the students is when the bow leaves the string. You know, what happened right before the spiccato section or the ricochet section or the sautille section? What happens right before that? And then how do we make that happen? So we have a section that's off the string, and whatever happened before that it's on the string, right? Or if it's at the very beginning of the piece, well, it better be on the string, because the bow always starts on the string. So where the section leaves the string is usually on the first note of the off-the-string section, and making sure that aligns will make everything else align. If they come off the string for the note previous, well, if half the section does that and the other half doesn't, it's going to create tempo problems, and the earlier we make the decision to leave the string, the less reliable that next note's going to be. So one thing that we can do is just make sure that we're teaching bow placement, just being able to take the bow off and reset it onto the string, off and onto the string. I call these circle bows. and making sure that we can come off the string and come on the string silently. That's part of the troubleshooting process for this, because we have to be able to figure out if they have the relaxation to be able to set the bow naturally and leave the string naturally. And if we can do these silent circle bows, then we either prove that our orchestras can do it, or that we need to work on relaxation, get them to work on just setting the bow, making sure that everything lines up. The other thing I want to leave you with is just with any technique, you can troubleshoot, you can use all these things. Not everybody's going to get it on the first day, and everybody's going to need to be okay with that. Sometimes it's just not going to work, and you just need to keep at it and keep reinforcing that, and make sure that when you're doing exercises to teach students off the string, that you're doing them consistently in class under your observation, and maybe even some peer coaching to make sure that they're getting enough exposure to it to where they can then take it home and do it on their own. But if you just do a one-day demo in class and say, okay, well, here's how to do a spiccato, well, number one, a lot of the players, if it's the first time they've ever done it, they're not going to get it on the first try. And number two, a lot of them aren't going to remember what they did when they got home. And so you're going to have to reteach a lot of this stuff, and possibly even incorporate it into your warm-up exercises. I mean, Michael Allen certainly emphasized spiccato in his daily warm-ups, so I don't see why you shouldn't warm up with spiccato. And again, it helps with more than just spiccato. It helps with overall relaxation as well, so I think that's why it makes a pretty good warm-up.